The year is 2021. The return of fully fan-packed stadiums and the first ever 17-game season were on the horizon. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers brought back all 22 starters, something no Super Bowl winning team in the salary cap era had ever done. Tom Brady and Bruce Arians said, "Let's run it right back," and the question was whether anyone was actually built to stop them, because they humiliated the Chiefs in Super Bowl 55, making Mahomes run for his life all game. The Chiefs responded by completely rebuilding the offensive line, intending to reclaim their spot atop the NFL. The Aaron Rodgers drama consumed the offseason. The reigning MVP skipped OTAs, blasted the front office, and teased retirement. We were genuinely wondering whether he was going to be the host of Jeopardy or the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. But in late July, Rodgers returned, with concessions. Green Bay traded for Randall Cobb, and Rodgers took the podium to vent about the organization. But the Los Angeles Rams, tired of Jared Goff's limitations, made the league's boldest move, trading for Matthew Stafford, a quarterback with elite talent but zero playoff wins for Detroit. Sean McVay believed they could unlock another level for one another. The Rams pushed their chips to the middle of the table, future picks be damned. And in the AFC, the Bills were going all in. Josh Allen morphed into an MVP type in 2020 with the addition of Stephon Diggs, finishing one step short of the Super Bowl. The Bills brought back every major weapon, added Emmanuel Sanders, and extended Allen for $258 million. Meanwhile, tension simmered in Seattle. Russell Wilson publicly criticized the team, questioned his protection, and flirted with a trade. He stayed, but his relationship with Pete Carroll and the front office was deteriorating. However, perhaps the biggest mystery team was Arizona. Kyler Murray entered year 3, and with a still elite DeAndre Hopkins, the Cardinals added J.J. Watt, A.J. Green, and James Conner. Head coach Cliff Kingsbury had weapons on both sides of the ball. Deshaun Watson, once seen as a top 5 QB and the Texans franchise cornerstone, now faced a litany of civil lawsuits after demanding a trade the previous winter. The Texans chose to keep him on the roster but inactive, making it clear he would not take a snap in 2021. Houston was in full-on tank mode. And Jacksonville made the most interesting hire of all. Urban Meyer, most recently at Ohio State in 2018, but now coming out of retirement, was in charge of the generational number 1 pick Trevor Lawrence, billed as the next Elway or Luck. But Lawrence wasn't alone. The Jets handed the keys to Zach Wilson at number 2 overall, a highlight reel thrower from BYU compared to Patrick Mahomes, tasked with reviving a dysfunctional franchise that had chewed through quarterbacks for a decade. Next, the 49ers traded 3 first-rounders to Miami to move up for Trey Lance at number 3, a raw but explosive North Dakota State dual-threat talent. Jimmy Garoppolo was still on the roster, creating an awkward standoff between a Super Bowl-capable starter and the allure of a sexier future. Then, in the midst of a historic 10-pick run consisting of Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Penei Sewell, J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, Devonta Smith, Micah Parsons, and Rashawn Slater, it seemed that Chicago had lucked into Justin Fields, a hyper-athletic QB in the same mold as Lance, but perhaps even more polished as a passer and underutilized as a runner in college. Fans believed he could free the Bears from decades of quarterback purgatory, but Matt Nagy's offensive scheme and a poor offensive line threatened his development. And Bill Belichick, after 1 year of Cam Newton and an uncharacteristic free agent spending spree, selected Mac Jones, a low-ceiling, high-floor Alabama passer designed to restore order just 2 years post-Brady. To make things even simpler, Cam Newton was cut outright. The 2021 draft dropped 5 potentially franchise-altering quarterbacks into the league's lap, but we were about to find out who, if anyone, could actually develop theirs. Even the AFC North had movement for a division where very little typically changes. The Ravens, battered by injuries before Week 1 even commenced, had confidence Lamar Jackson and a strong roster would weather the storm. The Browns, fresh off a playoff win, entered 2021 with real expectations and the hope that it was the beginning of something special with Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb, and Myles Garrett. And Cincinnati, with Joe Burrow returning from an ACL tear that cut his rookie year short, hoped they would be able to protect their number 1 pick enough for him and LSU teammate Jamar Chase to carry them to new heights. From his same class, Tua struggled mightily in 2020, but Justin Herbert ascended to superstardom in the blink of an eye, throwing for over 4,300 yards and a rookie record 31 touchdowns. But if there was one player who was impervious to modern football trends, it was Derrick Henry. In 2020, Henry repeated as rushing champion, running for 2,027 yards while defenses knew exactly what was coming from a Titans team built completely around him and an efficient connection between Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown. This video is sponsored by Walter Picks. I first heard about Walter Picks a couple years ago because this guy in my fantasy league was using it for literally everything, to the point that we've just been calling him Walter for years now. Walter Picks is an app backed by machine learning for sports betting and fantasy insights that you can use right on your phone. With the most up-to-date projections, you'll find the best player props, game bets, and DFS lineups before the lines move. I'll be the first to say sports betting is very complicated, but for me, Walter Picks makes it fun and simple. They offer 3 different plans to choose from. I'm on the Elite plan, and easily my favorite feature is the Trade Analyzer, where I can sync up my specific league, which has a bunch of unique settings, so conventional rankings don't really work as well. Aside from that, I can also easily spot good props to bet with the Player Prop Evaluator, so join thousands of us who are already using it to win. Download Walter Picks today by clicking my link in the description or scan the QR code to get a 7-day free trial. The 21 season opened with the beautiful sight of 66,000 strong at Raymond James Stadium as Tom Brady entered a shootout with Dak Prescott, who looked like he'd never missed a snap despite rehabbing a compound ankle fracture all offseason. Prescott threw 58 times for over 400 yards and pushed Dallas to the brink of a massive upset. But with 1:24 left, Brady calmly drove down the field with the help of Gronk and Godwin to set up the Ryan Suckup game winner. The real takeaway, though, was how good the Cowboys looked. Almost as good as Patrick Mahomes looked. In a playoff rematch with Cleveland, the Browns had their way for most of the game. But trailing 29-20, Mahomes floated the ball 50 yards in the air cross-body to Tyreek Hill for a 75-yard touchdown. Part of a 23-7 second-half run punctuated by the go-ahead and ultimately game-winning score to Kelsey. But the Packers season began in very unfortunate fashion. Aaron Rodgers played one of his worst games ever in a 38-3 blowout loss to the Saints held in Jacksonville because of Hurricane Ida. Rodgers threw 2 picks, and Green Bay was of course labeled as a team that had spent too much of the offseason arguing instead of preparing. Jameis Winston, on the other hand, hit the Packers with 5 touchdown passes on just 148 yards, adopting Sean Payton's efficient scheme over his chaotic nature. New Orleans looked impressive in Week 1 of Year 1 without Drew Brees. At the same time, Carolina surprised, opening 3-0 thanks to what appeared to be the beginning of a Sam Darnold redemption arc. But the team that sent the loudest message that first weekend was Arizona. Kyler Murray looked like a potential MVP, throwing 4 touchdowns while literally running circles around Tennessee. And Chandler Jones became the first player ever to record 3 sacks in the first quarter, ending with 5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles to put the Titans away. Arizona finished the month undefeated, and Kyler was the new ultra-dominant quarterback cheat code. Like Josh Allen, who had Buffalo positioned as a trendy Super Bowl pick. And even though they were upset by the Steelers in Week 1, they moved on and won their next 4 in dominant fashion, notching 2 shutouts and outscoring opponents 156-41. September also gave everyone their first look at the pro version of the Joe Burrow-Jamar Chase duo. In Week 1 against Minnesota, Chase torched Patrick Peterson for a 50-yard touchdown, silencing all the dramatic critics who labeled him a bust because of a few preseason drops. Cincinnati beat the Vikings in OT and would start 3-1. And on Monday night of Week 1, the Raiders-Ravens game ended 3 different times before it actually ended. A near touchdown at the goal line, a tipped interception, and finally a walk-off touchdown from Carr to Zay Jones. Vegas then beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh and the Dolphins in overtime. Instead of 1-2, they escaped 3-0. But no one got away with wins more dramatically than the Ravens. After losing their top 2 backs and star corner Marcus Peters before Week 1, they hosted the Chiefs in Week 2. Down 35-30, Lamar led a fourth-quarter game-winning touchdown drive to get his first victory over Mahomes 36-35. And in Week 3 against Detroit, Lamar hit Sammy Watkins for 36 yards to convert a 4th and 19 down 1 with 26 seconds left. Then watched Justin Tucker boot an NFL record 66-yard field goal that hit the crossbar and bounced in. But the Rams didn't need that much luck. In his LA debut, Stafford obliterated the Bears, then followed that by beating Tom Brady in Week 3. For the first time in a decade, people were asking whether Stafford was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, if Kupp was now an elite wide receiver, and whether the Rams were the best team in the NFC. Not to be outdone though, Derrick Henry, down 24-9 in Seattle, erupted for 182 yards and 3 touchdowns, dragging the Titans back from the dead in an OT win. And finally, the QBs of the future got their first sour taste of NFL action. Trevor Lawrence threw 7 picks in 3 games. Zach Wilson threw 4 interceptions against the Patriots alone. Trey Lance lurked in the background, entering only for special packages. Justin Fields was sacked 9 times in his first start. Mac Jones was the only one who looked remotely functional, even if painfully conservative and unimpressive. The Cardinals' defining win came in Week 4, when they went to LA and stomped the heavily favored Rams 37-20. It was at this moment that the league realized the Cardinals were clearly more than just a September story. Even when Cliff Kingsbury and several starters missed a game due to COVID protocols, Arizona still beat Cleveland in Week 6. They were the last undefeated team at 7-0. Kyler Murray was at the peak of his powers and frontrunner for MVP. But to close October, they faced the red-hot Packers on Thursday night, where we got this legendary meme, and Green Bay held a 24-14 lead early in the 4th. Arizona mounted a late comeback, driving to the Green Bay end zone in the final seconds, but on a Kyler Murray pass to AJ Green to win it, Green never turned around and Rasul Douglas picked it off, ending Arizona's perfect season. To make matters worse, DeAndre Hopkins strained his hamstring, and Kyler injured his ankle in the final minute. Each were set to miss a few weeks. Plus, the Rams kept pace at 6-1. Stafford shredded Seattle on Thursday night, a game that also brought bad luck for Seattle when Russell Wilson ruptured a tendon in his finger, the first time in his career he'd ever miss a game. Geno Smith stepped in and managed not to burn the whole thing down, but with Wilson possibly out for 2 months, Seattle stumbled through the rest of October. Meanwhile, the Packers erased all memories of their Week 1 disaster. Aaron Rodgers casually ripped off 7 straight wins.
Right on cue, Joe.
Even their chaotic overtime win over the Bengals, which was a comedy of missed field goals on both sides, added to their aura. At 7-1, the Packers were right back in the NFC's top tier, as were the Bucs, who mostly cruised through October, which included a win for Brady against Belichick in his return to New England. They suffered a loss to New Orleans in Week 8, but Jameis Winston tore his ACL in the same game, halting any momentum the 5-2 Saints had built up. And after starting 3-0, Carolina fell to 4-4 as Sam Darnold reverted to bad habits. So with Jameis done for the year and Carolina and Atlanta each at 4-4, Tampa Bay had all but locked up the NFC South by Halloween. The Cowboys barged through October behind a perfectly balanced offense and a defense fueled by the rise of Micah Parsons and the turnover magnet that was Trayvon Diggs, who had 7 interceptions and 2 pick sixes in 7 games. The peak of their euphoria to this point came in New England, where Dak hit CeeDee Lamb for a walk-off overtime touchdown, another signature moment in a season full of them. Dallas was 6-1, while the Titans, humbled by the Jets in Week 4, responded with 6 straight wins, including one over the Bills on Monday night where Henry ran for 143 yards and 3 touchdowns. 6 days later, they hammered the Chiefs 27-3. Henry was every bit of his vintage dominant self and more, until he went down with a broken foot in Week 8, posing a major challenge for Tennessee. And Kansas City looked shockingly mediocre. Through 8 weeks, Mahomes had nearly double the number of interceptions as he had in all of 2020, and KC was 4-4. But Baltimore wasn't exactly steamrolling teams either. After already stealing wins in September, they took it to another level in Week 5 on Monday night against the Colts. Down 22-3 late in the third, Lamar willed the Ravens to one of the season's best comebacks, throwing for 442 yards and 4 touchdowns, 2 of which went to Mark Andrews, who was emerging as arguably the best receiving tight end in the NFL. The Ravens won an OT for their 4th straight W. The most eye-popping moment of the month, though, happened Week 7 in Baltimore when Cincy hung 41 points on them. Chase went for 201 yards, and the Bengals briefly held the number 1 seed in the AFC, something no one predicted when the year began. Justin Herbert entered the MVP picture after a 47-42 shootout win over the Browns, but the Ravens exposed them the following week in a 34-6 blowout. And in one of the most surreal off-field sagas in years, a series of leaked emails revealed comments from John Gruden that caused him to resign immediately. Yet interim head coach Rich Bisaccia led them to 2 wins, reaching 5-2. But Buffalo appeared to be the actual best team in the AFC. they crushed Houston and Kansas City and likely would have beaten Tennessee if not for an agonizing failed quarterback sneak on 4th and 1. The Chiefs entered November with one of the worst defenses in the NFL, but it was at this time that they almost instantly flipped into an elite unit. They held the Packers to 7 points and the Raiders to 14 in a Patrick Mahomes 5-touchdown game. 1 month earlier, they were supposedly figured out by the league, but after Thanksgiving, the Chiefs were a solid 7-4. Meanwhile, the Rams were having a mid-season crisis after starting 7-1. Bullied by a Derrick Henry-less Titans where a 36-year-old Adrian Peterson was scoring on him, then blown out by San Francisco and gave up 36 to Green Bay. Stafford threw pick sixes in 3 straight games, and even the addition of Odell Beckham Jr., signed mid-season after leaving Cleveland, could not stop the slide. But the Patriots incredibly became the AFC's most unstoppable force. Even in October, they'd hung 54 on the Jets, but Belichick's defense was practically impossible to score on at this point. With them allowing 6.5 points per game in November, Mac Jones didn't exactly need to be Superman. Yet, they beat the Browns 45-7, shut out the Falcons 25-0 on Thursday night, and beat the Titans 36-13. They were on what would become a 7-game win streak, as arguably the most complete team in football, and Belichick was getting his flowers again after missing the playoffs in 2020. Even better for them, the Bills took a rough 9-6 loss to the Jags. Josh Allen, the Bills quarterback, threw 2 interceptions. Josh Allen, the Jaguars pass rusher, sacked him, intercepted him, and recovered his fumble. But the truly devastating blow came 2 weeks later during Jonathan Taylor's 5-touchdown masterpiece in Buffalo. Indianapolis ran for 264 yards, and Taylor had the title of best running back in the league and the MVP award in his crosshairs. Taylor's dominance became one of November's biggest stories. After an 0-3 start, Indy ran their way back into playoff contention by simply handing the ball to their superstar, who rushed for 139 yards a game and scored 9 touchdowns this month. Carson Wentz was inconsistent, but Taylor was so good he masked most of his flaws. And after John Gruden's departure in October, came Henry Ruggs' tragic DUI crash that took a woman's life and ended his NFL career. They were a mess off the field and on, going 1-3 this month. Similarly, the Lions kept finding new ways not to win. In Pittsburgh, they and the Steelers played one of the sloppiest games of the year, a 16-16 overtime tie. The Lions were still winless at 0-9-1. Cam Newton's return to Carolina briefly hijacked the league's imagination too. After signing mid-season because of an injured Darnold, he scored 2 touchdowns, playing a limited role in his first game. The Panthers upset the Cardinals that afternoon, and Cam felt like his 2015 MVP self until he lost the next 5 games as the starter, erasing any doubt that he was not completely washed. Aaron Rodgers stirred up controversy for a COVID absence, where people's heads exploded upon the revelation that he actually had not taken the vaccine. Jordan Love made his first start in a 13-7 loss to Kansas City. Dallas started the month with a hideous 30-16 loss to the Broncos, but bounced back by destroying Atlanta 43-3 before sputtering again versus Kansas City. And on Thanksgiving, they lost 36-33 in overtime to the Raiders in a game that featured 28 accepted penalties. Russell Wilson returned but lost all 3 November starts, and the Cardinals stayed atop the NFC because Colt McCoy won 2 big games in Kyler Murray's absence. So at the start of December, the Cardinals still held the NFC's best record at 10-2, and despite the fact that Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins had just returned from injury, their season began a free fall. In Week 13, they lost to the Rams on Monday night, then were on the receiving end of a 30-12 drubbing from the 1-win Detroit Lions, who had just recently picked up their first victory against a Vikings team that was mostly unnoteworthy outside of making the entire fan base hate Mike Zimmer. In the Cardinals-Rams game, though, DeAndre Hopkins tore his MCL, and looking back on it now, that injury marked the end of prime DeAndre Hopkins. The Cardinals went from frontrunners to fool's gold. But Deebo Samuel had become the greatest Swiss Army knife in football as the 49ers surged. Their postseason hopes came down to Week 18 versus the Rams. Down 17-0, Jimmy Garoppolo authored a clutch OT comeback to clinch a playoff berth. And the Chiefs continued to build on their resurgent November, annihilating the Raiders 48-9, then playing in one of the AFC's games of the year on Thursday night with the Chargers. This was the Kelsey game, 191 yards and the walk-off touchdown in overtime. By Christmas, the Chiefs were headed for one of the top seeds as expected. Jonathan Taylor continued to take over the league, putting up one of the best running back seasons of the past 10 years. But in Week 18, Carson Wentz played terribly in Jacksonville and lost to the worst team in football, eliminating them from the playoffs. The Bills' December began with the Snow Globe game against New England, where Mac Jones beat them despite only throwing 3 passes. But after an overtime loss to Tampa the following week, the Bills won their final 4 games. Most importantly, a rematch with the Pats where Josh Allen came through with a squeaky clean performance in Foxborough, regaining control of the AFC East. But in Green Bay, Rodgers was playing through a fractured toe. They beat the Rams, Bears, Ravens, and then the Browns on Christmas anyway, all while Rodgers ended the year on a run of 20 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. The Packers would clinch the NFC's #1 seed, and Rodgers won his 4th MVP, 2nd in a row. Dallas, meanwhile, became terrifying. Micah Parsons put together one of the best defensive rookie campaigns of all time, winning Defensive Rookie of the Year and finishing 2nd in Defensive Player of the Year behind TJ Watt, who tied the single-season sack record with 22.5 in 15 games. For the Cowboys, though, Trayvon Diggs had the best ball-hawking season of the century, with 11 interceptions. And their best game was a 56-14 obliteration of the Washington football team on Sunday night that made them look like the NFC's most explosive team. They had the best offense in the league, a borderline top 5 defense, and finished 12-5. And what began as a messy passing offense for Philly turned into the most dominant rushing attack in the league. Nick Sirianni leaned into Jalen Hurts' strengths, and the Eagles clawed their way from 2-5 to a 9-8 wildcard team. In LA, the Rams rebounded well. Stafford's turnovers were still abundant, but that didn't stop him from throwing 41 touchdowns, and it didn't stop Cooper Kupp from winning the receiver triple crown with over 1,900 yards, 145 catches, and 16 touchdowns. Promising second-year running back Cam Akers also returned from a July torn Achilles, and they won 5 of their last 6 to overtake Arizona for the NFC West. But no story in December hit harder than the Bengals announcing they should no longer be seen as underdog up-and-comers. Joe Burrow diced up the Ravens for 525 yards. A week later, Chase went for 266, and Burrow outplayed Mahomes with another 450 and 4 touchdowns. Cincinnati was a legit contender as Burrow entered the elite tier and Chase took home Offensive Rookie of the Year. However, the Titans, without Derrick Henry since Week 9 and missing A.J. Brown for a chunk of the month, saw their #1 seed slipping away, until Brown returned on Thursday night against the 49ers and single-handedly stopped their skid. Tennessee surged again and clinched the #1 seed despite Derrick Henry missing the last 9 games, but he was set to return for the playoffs. Elsewhere in the conference, the Browns went a disappointing 8-9. Lamar got added to the Ravens' injury avalanche in Week 13, and they fell apart without him. The Steelers were kept alive by TJ Watt's superhuman efforts and one-score wins, including Big Ben's emotional farewell at Heinz Field. The Raiders fought through a mountain of adversity, winning their final 4 games, namely an epic Week 18 overtime thriller over the Chargers, and earning a wild card. The Dolphins rode one of the strangest arcs ever, going from 1-7 to 8-7, but to a choked Week 17 in Tennessee, and that caused them to miss the playoffs. That same Week 17, Antonio Brown also gifted us with one of the most legendary implosions in NFL history against the Jets, where he stripped off his jersey and pads, waved to the crowd, and jogged off the field down 24-10 in the third quarter. That iconic stunt ended his NFL career, but the Bucs still came back to win. They finished 13-4 with Tom Brady passing for over 5,300 yards and 43 touchdowns at age 44. Joe Burrow kicked off Super Wildcard Weekend by treating his first playoff game like a national coming-out party, while the Raiders merely tried to keep up. The game wasn't without controversy due to an inadvertent whistle on a Burrow touchdown that lingered in the aftermath, but nonetheless, Cincinnati won 26-19. Ending a postseason win drought older than Burrow himself, and igniting the belief that this team could make a deep run. In Buffalo, the Bills unleashed one of the most perfect offensive games ever played. Against New England, Josh Allen engineered 7 touchdowns on 7 drives. The Patriots were stomped 47-17 in sub-zero wind chill, and the AFC East undoubtedly became the Bills' division. Meanwhile, Tampa Bay took care of business against the Eagles. Tom Brady dissected Philly's defense, and the Bucs took an overwhelming 31-0 lead before cruising to a 31-15 win. But the strangest game of the weekend was 49ers at Cowboys. San Francisco's defense sacked Dak 5 times, while Deebo Samuel and Eli Mitchell carried the offense to a 23-17 lead. But the ending became infamous Cowboys lore. With seconds left, Prescott took off up the middle with no timeouts, and the clock expired before he could spike it, though a 23-yard touchdown with 1 second left would have been unlikely anyway. In Kansas City, the Steelers briefly led 7-0 on a TJ Watt defensive touchdown, but Patrick Mahomes proceeded to throw 5 touchdown passes in 11 minutes of game time, booting Big Ben out of the NFL entirely. And finally, Rams-Cardinals on Monday night. Kyler Murray completed Arizona's collapse with his worst game as a pro. A pick-6 panic throw from his own end zone, 0 offensive rhythm, and a 34-11 loss. Matthew Stafford won his first career playoff game with ease. The 21 divisional round became the gold standard for playoff weekends. 4 games, 4 walk-off finishes. And it opened in Nashville, where the top-seeded Titans unleashed their pass rush on Joe Burrow to the tune of 9 sacks. And still, with the game tied late, Ryan Tannehill threw his 3rd interception of the day, setting up rookie kicker Evan McPherson, who told teammates that it looks like we're going to the AFC Championship, before drilling a 52-yard walk-off. Cincinnati advanced 19-16, eliminating the number 1 seed. On a frigid night in Green Bay, both offenses struggled, but trailing 10-3 with under 5 minutes left, the Niners blocked a punt for a touchdown, forced another punt, then drove just far enough for playoff assassin Robbie Gould to hit the game-winning kick as time expired. Another Aaron Rodgers MVP season up in smoke. Next up in Tampa, Los Angeles jumped ahead 27-3 before Tom Brady started to think it was Super Bowl 52, miraculously coming all the way back to tie the game at 27. But with seconds left, Stafford hit Cooper Kupp on the absolute clutchest of back-to-back clutch throws. A 20-yarder, then 44-yard shot to set up the walk-off field goal. Tampa would not repeat. And finally, Bills-Chiefs, one of the greatest playoff games ever played. Gabriel Davis scoring 4 touchdowns, 4 lead changes in the final 2 minutes, Mahomes picking up 44 yards in 13 seconds to force overtime, where the Chiefs won the coin toss, marched downfield, and ended it 42-36. Every game ended on the final play. The NFL has never topped this weekend and maybe never will. Championship Sunday began in Kansas City, where it looked like the Chiefs were about to cruise to a 3rd straight Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes dropped 21 points on the Bengals in the first half, but right before halftime, Kansas City botched a goal line sequence that would come back to haunt them. Cincinnati's offense slowly chipped away in the second half while the defense held strong, and late in the third, they tied the game, then even took a field goal lead in the fourth quarter. But with a 44-yard kick of his own, Harrison Butker sent it to overtime tied at 24, where the Chiefs won the coin toss, but Jesse Bates tipped a deep ball into Von Bell's hands. Burrow then guided the Bengals into range for another McPherson walk-off. Bengals 27, Chiefs 24. Cincinnati punched a ticket to their first Super Bowl in 33 years. But the NFC title game brought its own drama, as old buddies Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay squared off for the 3rd time this season. The Niners led 17-7 entering the fourth quarter, leaning on Deebo Samuel and their defensive front. But Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp refused to let such a special year go to waste. They connected for Kupp's 2nd touchdown of the day. Then, after tying it with a field goal, Stafford hit Kupp 2 more times on their next drive to set up the go-ahead kick. Jimmy Garoppolo responded with a pathetic and feeble 3-play possession that ended in an interception rather than going down the field and winning. Rams 20, 49ers 17. The Rams would be hosting the Bengals for Super Bowl 56 at home in SoFi Stadium. Under the bright lights of Los Angeles, the Rams and Bengals walked in with 2 entirely different identities. One team had spent years in win-now mode, trading every draft pick they could spare for stars. The other, a disrespected franchise riding the meteoric rise of their young quarterback. But the Rams found pay dirt first, with Stafford placing a perfect pass to Odell Beckham Jr. in the end zone. Cooper Kupp added another touchdown to their lead early in the second quarter, but the Bengals countered immediately, with a 75-yard drive culminating in a Joe Mixon touchdown pass to T. Higgins. And on LA's next possession, Beckham fell to the ground with a torn ACL while attempting to make a catch, His night and his brilliant postseason was over. With OBJ out and the Rams having a completely dogshit run game, the Bengals seized control. T. Higgins opened the second half with a 75-yard touchdown where the officials missed him tugging Jalen Ramsey to the ground by his face mask, giving Cincinnati a 17-13 lead. Then on the very next play, Stafford threw an interception off Ben Skronek's hands. At this moment, the Bengals were firmly in the driver's seat, but the Aaron Donald-led Rams defense kept the game well within reach, logging 6 of their 7 Joe Burrow sacks from this point on. Still, if the Rams were going to retake the lead, it was going to depend on Stafford and Kupp, and their final drive was an all-timer. The Rams picked up the first on a 4th and 1 jet sweep to Kupp at their own 30, and after 3 more Kupp grabs that got them to the red zone, he drew a defensive hold for a fresh set of downs in a goal-to-go situation before finally hauling in the fade that put LA ahead 23-20. Burrow got the ball and a chance to break the Rams' heart with 1:25 left. The exact situation you dream of for a legacy moment. But on 4th and 1 near midfield, Aaron Donald ran right by his double team and spun Burrow around as he flung a desperate pass in Samaje Perine's direction that was really not that far off. If that had been caught and the Bengals had won, we would be talking about that play the same way we talk about David Tyree's helmet catch. But it hit the ground and the Rams were champions. Aaron Donald and Von Miller wrecked the game with 2 sacks apiece. Sean McVay, at 36, became the youngest coach in NFL history to win the Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford erased 12 years of Detroit loserdom, and Cooper Kupp capped the greatest start-to-finish receiver season in NFL history. The Triple Crown, Offensive Player of the Year, countless season-saving grabs throughout each round, and then Super Bowl 56 MVP. But perhaps the most lasting image was Joe Burrow standing on the sideline. The thought present in everyone's mind that the future of the league had arrived, and it wouldn't be the last time we saw him on this stage. Thank you for watching this video sponsored by Walter Picks. Don't forget to download Walter Picks with this QR code or via the link below for your fantasy and sports betting needs.